The red dust of Mars swirled around Dr. Amanda Powell's boots as she walked carefully through the newly discovered tunnel. Her headlamp cut through the darkness, revealing walls that were too smooth to be natural. This was it, proof that someone had been here before humans. Her heart beat faster with each step. "Dr. Powell, you need to see this." Peter Cole's voice crackled through her radio. The neural technology specialist had gone ahead to scan the deeper chambers. His voice had an edge to it that made Amanda walk faster. The tunnel opened into a large room that took her breath away. The walls were covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly blue when her light touched them. In the center stood a pedestal with something that looked like a metal crown sitting on top. "Is it safe to approach?" she asked, remembering their safety protocols. They had found other alien sites before, but nothing like this. Peter checked his instruments and nodded. "No radiation, no energy signatures. It's completely dormant." Amanda moved closer to the pedestal, her trained eyes taking in every detail. The crown-like object was made of a dark metal she had never seen before. It had thin wires and small crystals worked into its surface in complex patterns. "This is different from anything we found in the other sites," she said, taking pictures with her helmet camera. "It looks like it was meant to be worn." Captain Derek Mason joined them in the chamber, his military training evident in the way he scanned the room before focusing on the artifact. "Let's not touch anything until we've done a full survey." They spent the next few hours documenting everything. The symbols on the walls told a story, one that became clearer as their computers translated more of the alien language. With each new translation, Amanda's excitement turned to horror. "This isn't just an alien site," she said, looking up from her tablet. "It's a warning." Peter and Derek gathered around her screen as she explained what they had found. The symbols told the story of a species called the Overseers. They had spread across the galaxy, not to explore or trade, but to enslave. The crown-like object was their tool, a neural implant they called a chain. According to this, Amanda continued, they used these devices to control other species. Once installed, it lets them control everything: thoughts, actions, even memories. She pointed to a series of symbols. They'd done this to dozens of civilizations. Derek's face hardened. "Why haven't we encountered them yet?" Peter, who had been quiet for a while, spoke up. "Look at these dates. If I'm reading this right, they work in cycles. They seed monitoring stations on planets near developing civilizations, when a species reaches a certain level of technology." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Amanda felt cold despite her suit's temperature controls. "They're coming. This whole chamber is a monitoring station. It probably activated when we first landed on Mars." "How long?" Derek asked. Amanda studied the translations again. "Based on the patterns described here, we have maybe 2 years before they arrive. They expect to find us unprepared, like all the others." Derek activated his command channel. "This is Captain Mason. I need a priority link to Earth Command. Authentication code Delta 79 Echo." While Derek made his report, Amanda and Peter continued studying the chamber. They found more details about how the chains worked, how the Overseers maintained control over such vast distances, and most importantly, the limits of their technology. "Look at this section," Peter said excitedly. "The chains need to be calibrated for each species' neural patterns. They had to modify their design for different brain structures." He pointed to a series of diagrams. "That's why they monitor first. They need to study the target species." Amanda understood what he meant, so they don't know if it will work on humans yet. They're just assuming it will, because it's worked on everyone else. The next few hours were a blur of activity. More research teams arrived, along with military personnel who began setting up secure communications and defense systems around the site. Amanda barely noticed them, too focused on downloading and translating every bit of information they could find. As the Martian sun set outside, casting long shadows through the entrance tunnel, Amanda sat back and rubbed her tired eyes. They had learned so much, but one thing stood out above all else. Humanity had something no other species in the database had: warning. The others never had a chance, she said quietly to Peter, who was still analyzing the neural implant. The overseers just showed up and took control before anyone knew what was happening. But we know they're coming. Derek, who had finished his reports to Earth Command, joined them again. And we're going to be ready for them. Every military force on Earth is being mobilized. Scientists are being recruited to study this technology. We're not going to be another set of slaves in their collection. Amanda looked at the wall of symbols one last time before they packed up for the day. Among the warnings and technical details, she had found something else, something that gave her hope. The overseers weren't gods or demons. They were just another species that had found a way to control others. And anything made by a species could be broken by a species. As they walked back through the tunnel, their footprints joining the countless others now marking the dust, Amanda thought about what they had discovered. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they weren't, but they also knew their first contact would be a fight for their very freedom. 2 years, she said to herself. 2 years to prepare for an enemy that's never lost. She smiled slightly, remembering all the times in human history when the impossible had been overcome, when the unbeatable had been beaten. They've never met humans before. Back in their base camp, teams of scientists and military personnel were already setting up new equipment and communication arrays. Humanity had just been pulled into a galaxy-spanning conflict they never knew existed. But unlike all those who had come before, they had something precious: time to prepare, knowledge of what was coming, and most importantly, the determination to remain free. The chains that had bound so many others were waiting in that chamber, silent and dark. But they would find that humans weren't so easy to chain. The species that had broken every limit placed on them, from gravity to the speed of sound to the bonds of Earth itself, was about to show the galaxy why they deserved their freedom. And it all started here, in a dusty chamber on Mars, where humanity first learned they would have to fight for their right to remain free. Commander Laura Bennett stood at the window of Earth's orbital defense station, watching her fleet perform practice maneuvers. 2 years of preparation had changed humanity's space forces completely. Ships that once explored now carried weapons. Scientists had become soldiers. Everyone knew what was coming. "Commander, we got something." Ryan Kelly's voice came through the station speakers. The chief engineer had been monitoring the deep space sensors. Multiple objects just appeared at the edge of Jupiter's orbit. "They're big." Laura's heart jumped, but her voice remained steady. "Sound the alert. Get me a direct line to all fleet commanders." She turned to her tactical display as red warning lights began flashing throughout the station. "This is what we've trained for, people." The overseer ships were exactly as the Mars archives had described them. Massive black vessels shaped like arrowheads. There were 15 of them, moving in perfect formation. They didn't try to hide or move slowly. Why would they? No species had ever resisted them before. "All ships, move to defensive positions," Laura ordered. "Remember your training. Don't let them get close enough to use their short-range weapons." The human fleet, nearly 100 ships strong, spread out in the carefully planned pattern they had practiced countless times. The first message from the overseers came exactly as expected. A face appeared on their screens, humanoid but wrong, with gray skin and eyes too large and dark. It spoke in perfect English. "People of Earth, we come to welcome you into the greater galactic community. Prepare to receive our gift of unity." Laura smiled grimly. "Send our response." The message they had prepared played. "We know what you are. We know about the chains. We choose to remain free." There was a long pause. Laura could almost imagine the confusion among the overseers. No species had ever known about them in advance. No species had ever said no. The overseer's voice came back, all pretense of friendliness gone. "You cannot resist. You will be chained, like all others." "Watch us," Laura said, and gave the order to attack. The human fleet moved first, unleashing a barrage of missiles. Dr. Susan Martinez and her team had spent 2 years studying the overseer technology described in the Mars archives. They knew the weaknesses of their shields, the blind spots in their defenses. 3 overseer ships exploded before they could react. Their perfect formation broke apart as they tried to respond to an attack pattern they had never seen before. "They're launching their control ships," Ryan reported. These were smaller vessels, designed to get close and release the neural control devices, just as the archives had described. "Spring the trap," Laura ordered. Hidden throughout the debris field they had created, smaller human fighters powered up and attacked the control ships from behind. These pilots had trained specifically for this moment, learning to fight in ways the overseers had never seen. The battle raged for hours. Human ships took heavy damage. The overseers were powerful, even when surprised. But they had never faced an enemy who knew their tactics, who had prepared specifically to fight them. "Commander," Susan's voice came through excited. "The scan results confirm it. Their neural technology isn't calibrated for human brains. The few control devices that got through aren't working." Laura allowed herself a small smile. The Mars archives had been right about that too. The overseers relied too heavily on their control technology. When it failed, they didn't know how to handle resistance. "All ships, push forward," she ordered. "Don't let them regroup." The human fleet pressed their advantage. Ships that should have been easy prey turned out to be deadly hunters. Tactics that had worked for thousands of years failed against humans who had studied and planned for this exact battle. The overseer fleet began to retreat, something they had never done before. 8 of their capital ships were destroyed, and most of their control ships were gone. "They're sending out a signal," Ryan reported. "It's powerful. Looks like they're calling for reinforcements." Laura had expected this. "Let them call. We've shown them something important today. Humans aren't easy prey." As the remaining overseer ships disappeared into deep space, the human fleet regrouped. They had lost 23 ships and over 1,000 people. Each loss hurt, but everyone had known the stakes. Freedom had a price. In the aftermath of the battle, Laura received reports from around the solar system. The defense platforms around Mars and the Moon had held. Earth's surface hadn't been threatened. Most importantly, not a single neural control device had successfully activated. "Dr. Martinez wants to speak with you," Ryan said, looking up from his console. "She says it's important." Susan's face appeared on the screen, her eyes bright with excitement, despite her obvious exhaustion. "Commander, we captured intact control devices, and the data we collected during the battle. It's incredible. Their technology isn't just failing on humans. It's failing in a way that might help us understand how to free others." Laura leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Our brains are different," Susan explained. "The way we process information, the way we adapt and change our neural patterns, it's unlike anything they've encountered. When their control signals hit our minds, they don't just fail. They shatter in ways that might let us develop a way to break existing chains. So we're not just fighting for ourselves," Laura said quietly. "We might be able to free everyone they've enslaved." The implications were enormous. Humanity had just fought off their would-be enslavers, but this could be the beginning of something much bigger. They had the knowledge from Mars, captured overseer technology, and now proof that humans could resist the chains. "They'll be back," Ryan said, looking at the tactical display where the retreat of the overseer ships was marked. "And they'll bring more ships next time." Laura nodded. "Yes, they will. But we'll be ready. And now we know something they don't. Their perfect system of control isn't so perfect after all." She looked out at her battered but undefeated fleet. Humanity had just fought its first interstellar battle, faced a seemingly unbeatable enemy, and survived. More than survived, they had won. "Send word to Earth," she ordered. "Tell them we held the line. And tell them to get ready. This was just the beginning." As her crew carried out her orders, Laura thought about what this victory meant. The species that had broken the bounds of their planet had now broken the expectations of the galaxy. The overseers would return, yes, but they would find that humans only grew stronger when challenged. The stars shone brightly through the station's window, no longer just points of light, but beacons of possibility. Somewhere out there, countless enslaved species lived under the control of the chains. They didn't know it yet, but hope was coming. Humanity had proved they could fight. Now they would prove they could free. Catherine Wright sat in her dimly lit office beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by screens filled with strange symbols. 6 months had passed since humanity's first victory against the overseers. But that battle had only been the beginning. Now she had a different kind of fight on her hands. "We're getting another signal," she called out to Agent Daniel Ross, who stood nearby. "This one's using the new frequency we discovered last week." Daniel moved quickly to her station. After years of working in intelligence, he knew the importance of every communication they received. "Can you decode it?" Catherine's fingers flew over her keyboard. "It's like the others, hidden in the background noise of regular overseer communications." She paused, studying the decoded message. "It's from the Centauri sector, more slaves wanting to break free." The discovery had come 3 months ago. Among the normal overseer communications they monitored, they found hidden messages, not from the overseers, but from their slaves. Some had found ways to think freely despite their chains, and they had been watching Earth's resistance with hope. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open to reveal their newest team member, a tall, thin figure with gray-blue skin and large eyes. Clarak had once been a slave of the overseers. Now he was their most valuable ally. "More of my people wish to join your resistance," Clarak said, his translator converting his whistling language into English. "They have seen that freedom is possible." Catherine brought up a map of known overseer territory on the main screen. Dozens of red dots showed where they had found hidden resistance cells. "Each group we contact brings us more information about how the chains work, and each one wants to fight back." Daniel studied the map thoughtfully. The overseers never expected their slaves to resist. They relied too much on their technology. They never understood something important about control, Clarak added. "The harder you try to hold something, the more it wants to break free." Catherine opened a new communication channel, carefully hidden within normal space traffic. Over the past months, they had built a secret network spanning several star systems. Slaves who could still think freely helped others break through their conditioning. They gathered information, sabotaged overseer operations, and waited for the day they could fight back. "We've confirmed what you discovered about human brains," Clarak said, moving to one of the medical displays. "Your neural patterns are chaos to the chains. They cannot hold you because you change too quickly. Think in too many different ways." Catherine remembered the day they made that discovery. She had been analyzing the failed control devices from the battle, trying to understand why they didn't work on humans. The answer was beautiful in its simplicity. Human brains were too adaptable, too prone to forming new patterns. The chains needed stability to work, but human minds were anything but stable. "New message coming in," she announced. This one was different, urgent. "It's from the Rigel colony. They say the overseers are gathering a massive fleet, much bigger than what they sent to Earth." Daniel's face grew serious. "They're not just coming to chain us this time. They're coming to destroy us. We've become too dangerous to their control." "Then we need to move faster," Catherine said. She pulled up the files on their latest project. "Show them what we've been working on, Clarak." The alien moved gracefully to the central display and brought up a series of complex diagrams. "We have combined human neural patterns with our knowledge of the chains. The result is—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Beautiful." On the screen, a simulation showed how human brain waves could be used to disrupt the chain's control signals. Like adding chaos to perfect order, it made the whole system break down. "If we can broadcast this pattern across their network," Catherine explained, "we might be able to break every chain at once." The overseers would lose control of their entire empire in moments, Clarak added, his large eyes shining with hope. A new message flashed on one of Catherine's screens. Then another, and another. Across the galaxy, slave species were responding to their calls. Some could only send the briefest signals, fighting against their chains for moments of clarity. Others had formed complete resistance cells, hiding their free thoughts from their masters. "We're not just fighting for Earth anymore," Daniel said quietly. "We're fighting for everyone they've enslaved." Catherine looked at her screens, at the messages coming in from countless stars. Each one represented people who wanted to be free, who had seen Earth's resistance and found hope. The overseers had spent thousands of years building their empire of slaves. They thought they were unbeatable. "How long until we can test the disruption signal?" she asked Clorak. "A few more weeks," he replied. "We must be careful. If it fails, the overseers will know what we tried to do." Catherine nodded and turned back to her communications. More messages were coming in, more slaves reaching out for help. She thought about how long they had lived under the chains, how many generations had known nothing but servitude. "Tell everyone to be ready," she said, sending out coded replies through their hidden network. "The overseers think they're coming to crush Earth's resistance. Instead, they're going to face every species they ever tried to chain." Clorak made a sound that his translator didn't catch, something between a laugh and a song. "My people have a saying. The strongest chains are the ones you don't know you're wearing." The overseers are about to learn that their real chains were their reliance on control. In the depths of their mountain base, Catherine and her team continued their work. They gathered information, sent messages of hope to the stars, and prepared for the biggest prison break in galactic history. The overseers were coming with their massive fleet, thinking they would find one defiant species. Instead, they would find an entire galaxy ready to break free. Humanity hadn't just resisted the chains. They had shown everyone else that resistance was possible. "Send out the new codes," Catherine told her team. "Tell everyone to be ready. When the overseers come for Earth, we're going to show them what really happens when you try to chain free people." Above their mountain base, the stars shone in the night sky. Each one might hold another species waiting to break free. The overseers had spent millennia building their empire of slaves. Humanity was about to help tear it down. The underground network grew stronger every day. The species that broke chains was about to help others break theirs too. Dr. Nathan Phillips stared at the holographic display in his lab, watching the patterns of human brainwaves dance across the screen. He had been studying these patterns for months, trying to understand why humans were different from every other species the overseers had encountered. "Run the simulation again," he told his assistant, Maria Rodriguez. "But this time, let's add the stress response data." Maria nodded and entered the new parameters. The patterns changed, showing how human brains reacted under pressure. Unlike other species, whose patterns became more rigid when stressed, human patterns became even more chaotic and unpredictable. "That's it," Nathan whispered, leaning forward. "That's why their chains can't hold us. We don't just resist, we get harder to control the more they try." Lieutenant Jennifer Harris watched from the doorway. As the leader of their special operations team, she needed to understand what they were discovering. "Can you explain it simply?" Nathan turned to her, his eyes bright with excitement. "Think of it like trying to grab water. The harder you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. That's what human brains do when the chains try to control them." "And that's not normal?" Jennifer asked. "Not at all," Maria answered, pulling up comparison data from their alien allies. "Look at these patterns from other species. Their brains try to find stable patterns, predictable responses. But humans," she gestured at their data, "we're constantly changing, adapting, finding new ways to think." Nathan walked to another display, this one showing a captured chain device. The overseers built their control technology to work with stable, predictable minds. They'd never imagined a species whose thoughts were naturally chaotic. "We're not just resistant," he continued. "Our brains actually fight back against the control. And the more the chains try to force us into patterns, the more strongly we resist." Jennifer smiled. "So they built a trap for organized minds, but our minds are naturally disorganized." "Exactly," Nathan said. "And here's the really important part. We think we can use this to help others break free. He brought up a new display, showing how human brainwave patterns interfered with the chain's control signals. It's like adding static to a clear radio signal. If we can broadcast these patterns through their control network, we could break every chain at once. Maria finished. The lab door opened, and a group of freed aliens entered. They had been essential to their research, helping them understand how the chains worked and testing their theories about breaking them. Show them what we discovered, Nathan told Maria. She activated their test chamber, where a deactivated chain sat on a pedestal. Around it, sensors projected a field of human neural patterns. The chain tried to activate, its crystals glowing as it attempted to establish control. But the human patterns disrupted it, making it sputter and fail. "Your minds are beautiful chaos," one of the aliens said, watching the display. "We were taught that chaos was weakness, that control and order were strength. But your chaos is what makes you free." Nathan moved to his main research terminal. "We've mapped how the chains try to create order in minds, how they force thoughts into patterns they can control. But human thoughts." He showed them a visualization of human neural activity. "We're like water wearing away stone. We find ways around barriers, create new paths, adapt to any obstacle. That's why they fear us," Jennifer said. "We're not just resisting their control. We're proving their whole system is flawed." The team worked through the night, refining their understanding. They learned how to strengthen the disruption effect, how to protect other species' minds as they broke free from control. Each discovery brought them closer to their goal. "Look at this," Maria called out, pointing to her screen. She had been studying the long-term effects of their disruption field. The freed minds don't just break the chains, they start showing more human-like patterns. They become harder to control. Nathan examined her data. "Freedom is contagious," he said softly. "Once they see it's possible to resist, their minds start finding their own chaos, their own ways to break free." Jennifer watched them work, understanding the importance of what they were discovering. This wasn't just about breaking the chains, it was about teaching others how to stay free. "How long until we can use this?" she asked. Nathan checked their progress. "The basic disruption field is ready now. But to broadcast it across their whole network," he did some quick calculations. "We need to get close to their main control hub, and we need to keep the field active long enough for every enslaved mind to break free." "That's where we come in," Jennifer said, thinking of her special operations team. "We'll get you where you need to be." As they finalized their plans, more freed aliens arrived to help. Each one brought new insights, new understanding of how the chains had controlled them. And each one marveled at how human minds naturally resisted that control. "Your species evolved without chains," one of them observed. "You never learned to think in ways that could be easily controlled. That's your strength." Nathan looked at all they had discovered. The complex interplay of chaos and order, the way human minds naturally fought against control, the possibility of freedom spreading like a wave across the galaxy. "The overseers thought they had built perfect chains," he said, "but they never understood something important about minds. The ones that can't be chained are the ones that change their own patterns." Maria added their latest data to their broadcasts for the Resistance Network. Across the galaxy, hidden groups would use this knowledge to prepare for what was coming. The species that had never been chained was about to teach the galaxy how to break free. "We're ready," Nathan announced, looking at his team. "Now we just need to get this to their control hub." Jennifer nodded grimly. "Leave that to us. You've built the key. We'll make sure it reaches the lock." Outside the lab, the war continued. The overseers were gathering their forces, preparing to crush the species that had dared to resist them. But in this quiet lab, humanity had discovered something more powerful than any weapon: the secret of true mental freedom. The chains that had bound the galaxy were about to meet the species that had never learned to think in chains. And in that meeting, everything would change. Admiral Eric Foster stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as the combined fleet of humans and freed aliens gathered near the edge of overseer space. This was the largest fleet ever assembled, not just human ships, but vessels from every species that had managed to break free. "All ships report ready," Timothy Clark said from his tactical station. The ground team leader had trained for months for this mission. "The resistance networks are standing by. The broadcast device is at full power," Dr. Ashley Turner reported. Checking her instruments, the scientist had worked with Dr. Phillips to create a version of the chain-breaking signal that could reach across the entire overseer network. "Once we reach their control hub, we can free everyone at once." Eric looked at his display, showing hundreds of ships of different designs and origins. Each represented a group of people who had chosen to fight for freedom. The overseers had never faced anything like this before. "Send the signal to begin," he ordered. "Let's show them what happens when free minds work together." The fleet moved forward as one, entering overseer space through paths that hidden resistance members had mapped out. They encountered their first enemy ships within minutes. "They don't understand what they're seeing," Timothy said, watching the overseer ship's confused movements. "They've never had their slaves fight back before." The battle began, but it was unlike any fight the overseers had seen in their thousands of years of rule. Their perfectly ordered formations met chaos and creativity. Ships moved in ways that made no sense to their tactical computers. Every strategy they had developed over millennia proved useless against minds that thought freely. "We're getting closer to their hub," Ashley reported, "but their main fleet is moving to intercept." Eric had expected this. "Send in the next wave." Across overseer space, hidden resistance cells began their attacks. Slaves who had been secretly fighting their chains for months chose this moment to resist openly. Supply lines broke. Communication networks failed. Carefully maintained order fell into chaos. "They're trying to activate emergency controls on their slave species," Ashley warned, watching her screens. "They're increasing power to all chains." But this was exactly what they had planned for. The harder the overseers tried to control their slaves, the more human-like chaos spread through their minds. Just as Dr. Phillips had discovered, freedom was contagious. "Main fleet ahead," Timothy announced. "They've gathered everything they have left to protect the hub." Eric looked at the massive fleet blocking their path. The overseers had built their empire over thousands of years. They wouldn't let it fall without a fight. "All ships, move to attack pattern Delta," he ordered. This was a formation they had created specifically for this battle, one that looked like madness but held a deeper purpose. "Begin broadcast on all frequencies." Ashley activated their secret weapon. Every ship in their fleet began broadcasting the human neural patterns that disrupted the chains. The signal wasn't strong enough to break the chains at this distance, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to create doubt. The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. The overseer fleet, perfect and organized, faced ships that moved like water, flowing around their defenses in patterns they couldn't predict. Former slaves fought with the desperate strength of people who could taste freedom. "We're getting through," Timothy shouted as a gap opened in the overseer line. "Ground teams, prepare for deployment." Small, fast ships shot through the gap, carrying teams led by Timothy toward the control hub. The massive station hung in space like a spider in the center of its web, connected to every chain in overseer space. "The hub's defenses are failing," Ashley reported. "The resistance cells inside are fighting back." Eric watched as the ground teams landed on the hub. Timothy's voice came through clearly as they fought their way inside, helped by slaves who had been waiting for this moment. "We're approaching the main control room," Timothy reported. "Dr. Turner, get ready to broadcast." Ashley's fingers flew over her controls, preparing the signal that would change everything. They had one chance to get this right. "Control room secured." Timothy's voice held excitement and disbelief. "Beginning upload now." Ashley watched her screens as the signal fed into the hub systems. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like a wave spreading across the galaxy, the chains began to break. "It's working," she cried. The neural patterns are spreading through their entire network. On every screen, they could see the effect. Overseer ships stopped in mid-attack as their slave crews broke free. The perfect order of their empire cracked, replaced by the beautiful chaos of freedom. Message from the ground team, Timothy reported. The hub's archives are unlocked. We're learning everything. How they built their empire, how many species they enslaved, everything. Eric stood watching as thousands of years of control and slavery ended. Across the galaxy, minds were awakening to freedom for the first time. The species that had never been chained had kept its promise. They had broken every chain. The overseers are retreating, Timothy announced. Their entire system is falling apart. Let them run, Eric said. They'll never control anyone again. In the days that followed, the full scale of what they had achieved became clear. Billions of minds had broken free at once. Species that had been slaves for generations were learning to think for themselves again. We're getting messages from everywhere, Ashley reported, her eyes bright with tears. They all want to thank Earth. We showed them freedom was possible. Eric looked out at the stars, thinking about how much had changed. The overseers had spent thousands of years building perfect chains, creating an empire of perfectly controlled minds. They never understood that their greatest mistake was trying to chain the one species that couldn't be controlled. Send word to Earth, he ordered. Tell them it's done. The chains are broken. As their fleet began the journey home, they passed ships full of newly freed people. Some were returning to homes they had nearly forgotten. Others were exploring space as free beings for the first time. The species that broke chains had done more than save themselves. They had shown the galaxy that chaos could be stronger than control, that free minds would always find ways to break their chains. And in the endless night of space, countless stars shone on countless free worlds, where people were learning to think their own thoughts again. The age of chains was over. The age of freedom had begun.